here you go. Yes, now you're perfect.
Yeah, I had to go all the way out.
Okay, all right. Bring it over to you. Thank you.
No problem. So glad to have a chance to talk with you today about one of my favorite topics, which are the shorebirds. And the shorebirds can be truly difficult. I mean, just to put it mildly, even in this introductory slide right here, it's hard to believe there are 3 different species of shorebirds in this picture right here. The one standing is a Dunlin, but like right here, this one, can you see my cursor?
Yes.
Yes, good. This one right here, and actually most of these over here are Western Sandpipers. And then this big guy here and here are Sanderlings. So even though this looks like it's a group of all the same species, actually there are 3 different kinds of sandpipers in there. So let's take a look at some of these different kinds of sandpipers and plovers and have a chance to see the great diversity that we have right here in Florida. And throughout the world, there are well over 200 species of shorebirds. And here in Florida, we've got about 52 species that have been recorded in Florida. And so we might as well start with some of the ones that are pretty straightforward, like a killdeer. I mean, killdeer are unusual among the shorebirds that we have around here because they're really not even found along shorelines usually. They're out in open fields. This is a bird of open country. And it's really noisy with this call. It's named for its call, killdeer, and it has 2 bands on the chest. So that makes it pretty easy to identify. They'll nest in all kinds of places along a railroad track, any place with gravel. This was at a nest that I found. Actually, those are wood chips in a flower bed area near some open fields. But the youngsters are cute as can be. They're what are called precocial young. That's true of our shorebirds, is that rather than having being completely naked like a cardinal or a mockingbird would be as a baby, they pop out of the shell and they're ready to run around like this adorable little killdeer chick. One confusing thing is that when killdeer are really young, they only have 1 chest band. So that can be a little confusing with some of our other plovers, but that's a small feature that doesn't stay that way for very long. And then we have one of the most common shorebirds that you find along all of our beaches, and that's the black-bellied plover. You also find them occasionally inland, especially around some big agricultural areas. I just found about 40 of them at the Daytona Beach Airport inland on a grassy airport field. So they do spend some time in some other kinds of habitats. But you have to ask, who names these birds? Because, I mean, take a look at this bird. Black-bellied plover doesn't seem right. But when you have a chance to see this bird in breeding plumage, then you see it is truly the black-bellied plover. And they are stunning when they're in breeding plumage. And we get to see birds like this usually in May and again in the early fall, really late summer when they're coming back from their breeding grounds. And this is a bird, even though it's common on our beaches and you see them regularly here, they do not nest in Florida. And so they're going to take the wing, and when they fly, they show a big white rump area and a nice white wing stripe. That will differentiate one of these birds from a golden plover that's going to be solidly colored across the rump here. Here's a black-bellied plover to give you some size relationships. This is a black-bellied plover in the background. In the middle is a Wilson's plover, and in the front is a least sandpiper. So you can see from the tiny least sandpiper to the medium-sized Wilson's plover, to the much big and chunkier the black-bellied plover. So when these guys leave, they're going to leave our coastal areas, and they are going to fly all the way north to the Arctic tundra on the edge of the Arctic Ocean. And in these areas, these brownish markings along here, and coastal Alaska, and all through the northern parts of Canada, this is the breeding grounds of the black-bellied plover. And so they're traveling tremendous distances to spend the warmer months with us. This is the American golden plover. Much like that black-bellied plover, but the bill is much slimmer. This was taken on Disappearing Island here in Volusia County. You can see that it's browner overall, and a very distinctive mark over the eye, this light mark over the eye, and a much, much slimmer bill than an American golden, than the black-bellied plover. And when they fly, rather than that white rump, here you can see the rump is the same color as the back, and the tail itself is much darker than on a black-bellied plover. Here's this is actually the same bird. This is American golden plover, and on the right is a black-bellied plover. So it's a slimmer bird, much smaller bill, and much slimmer bill, and just not quite as chunky as the black-bellied plover. And the extreme rarity, this is a photograph by Reinhard Geisler, who took this amazing photograph of the Pacific golden plover that visited Florida a few years ago. And this was a spectacularly beautiful bird, and has these golden markings all throughout the plumage, and was very distinctive, very long legs, a slim bill like you would expect from the golden plover group, but lots of these beautiful spangles. Another one of these birds was found by the great shorebird expert Richard Crosley just last year. So we've had two of them show up in Florida in the just the last few years. One of the most common of our plovers is the little semipalmated plover. The term semipalmated means that there's a little bit of webbing between the toes. So rather than a totally palmate or totally webbed, they're semi-palmated. And so there's a little bit of webbing between the toes on the semipalmated. That's where they get the name, but you're not really going to see that. You have to photograph it very closely to ever be able to see that little bit of skin between the toes. But this is kind of like a killdeer, but only one band, kind of these orangey, yellowish colored legs, and a very small bill, much smaller bill than you see on the black-bellied plover. And if you take a look at the back color, the back is the color of wet mud. They are a pugnacious little creature, and often you'll see them fighting with another one over favored feeding areas. So this is two semipalmated plovers going at it. This is the snowy plover. Along our Atlantic coast, we very, very rarely see this. I've only seen one in Volusia County, and and yet on the Gulf Coast, you can find them, and they are much paler than the semipalmated. They have a very slim black bill and black legs, and that gives them a good contrast with this guy, the piping plover. So the piping plover is also very pale, but has these orangey legs. This one is banded because piping plovers are really threatened and endangered species, depending on the area in which they breed. And we're lucky enough to have good numbers of them along our coastlines. Piping plovers have two different populations. There is an interior population that's a little bit darker backed and there is a coastal population, and these are very, very white and have pale lores, a spot between the eye and the bill, and both of them do visit our Florida coastlines. In flight, they have a really a bold mark on the wings and a nice white rump. Wilson's plover is one of the most interesting shorebirds that we have here because it nests here. And we really don't have very many shorebirds that will actually nest in Florida, but Wilson's plover is one of them. And they're a bit bigger than the semipalmated and the snowy and piping plovers. It's a step up from them with a much larger bill, longer legs, but the legs are pink. And when the breeding season comes, you'll see the males courting the females. And this was taken in Ponce Inlet on Disappearing Island. And here you have the male with the blacker chest band and the females browner overall with a brown chest band. And here he's actually stroking the back of the female. And then he'll actually switches legs and he uses the other leg, and then they mate. And then you end up with these birds breeding on open sand. And you can imagine finding a beach where you can actually lay an egg, or incubate the egg for a fairly long period, and then raise a youngster in Florida on a beach. It's hard to find. And so these birds are having serious difficulty finding undisturbed nesting sites. And this was on Disappearing Island in Volusia County. Here you can see the egg here nestled in the vegetation, and the female standing guard over it. This is what the nest looks like of Wilson's plover. And if you get too close to the nest or to the youngsters, they do a broken wing act. And just like Killdeer are famous for broken wing acts, well, Wilson's plover does it also in order to entice you away, to follow the bird that appears to be injured, and it cause the predator to go after him instead of looking for this little guy. And this is a baby, obviously, that you can see the wings are just little vestiges. So it's just been born. It's just a little ball of fluff that just runs over the open sand. One of the most colorful of the shorebirds that we have here is the Ruddy Turnstone. They get the name Ruddy Turnstone for good reason, because the bill is actually, it's straight on the upper mandible, but the lower mandible is curved. And this allows them to slide that bill underneath a stone and turn it over. So turn stone, it's they're going to find little organisms to eat on the underside of shells and rocks. And so we have Ruddy Turnstones here during most of the year. But like the Black-bellied Plover and many of other sandpipers, this fellow is going to head to the Arctic tundra to build its nest. Another one that actually nests here is the American Oystercatcher, and they are just stunning with that red eye ring over a yellow eye, this huge orange bill. And when they're breeding, it's hard to even see this. These little chicks are so well camouflaged, but there are two chicks here, one here and another one right under the legs of the adult. And so they blend in incredibly well with the oyster bars where the oyster catchers tend to nest. So here are two babies with an adult American oyster catcher. And as the oyster catcher gets older, young oyster catchers actually have a two-tone bill. It's dark on the tip and it's not fully orange yet. In flight, they have an incredible striking white panel that goes down the wings. Another striking bird that we've got in our area is the black-necked stilt. And black-necked stilts also have a striking black and white pattern, white on the underside, and then this big white mark that runs up the back over these beautiful black wings. And they have these improbably long legs that allows them to wade into fairly deep water. And this is also a bird that nests here. This took this photo in the Merritt Island National Wildlife Refuge, which is a great place to see a lot of different types of shorebirds, including the black-necked stilt, and they nest here also. To give you a size comparison, here's a black-necked stilt on the left and an American avocet on the right. So American avocets are truly, totally cool birds. Another one with these improbably long legs and a very, very long, super slim bill that is up curved. And the up curve allows them to feed on organisms right at the water's surface. So they can put their head down, and rather than the bill sticking down into the water, the curve allows them to be able to move the bill back and forth across the very top surface of the water. To give them some size comparison, you all know a white ibis, and you can see the size of an American avocet. That's a big shorebird. So, you know, nearly half the size of a white ibis. And again, a striking pattern. Like many of our shorebirds, they have really striking patterns when they fly. Sometimes you see them on beaches, and here is a group of them walking on a beach. Another bird that we find on the beaches is the marbled godwit. Marbled godwits have these really stunning bill. This is a beautiful bird, the nice warm brown tones, and this two-tone bill with a black tip and kind of flesh-colored base, pink base, and that enables them to probe deeply into the mud for different organisms. And that bill is just extremely long and a slight up curve to the bill. Another one that has a very distinctive bill is the whimbrel. And whimbrels, though, it's a down curved bill and with these very distinct stripes on the head. Another big shorebird. And in comparison, there's the long-billed curlew that we get more rarely with an even longer down-curved bill, but it doesn't have that distinct striping on the head. Let me go back and show you. There's the very well-defined striping on a whimbrel, and then very indistinct on a long-billed curlew. Long-billed curlews are going to breed out in the western United States. So most of them are going south from there, but we get a small number that make it over to the Florida coastline. One of the confusing pairs are greater and lesser yellowlegs. And this is a greater yellowleg on the left, and it's a lesser yellowlegs on the right. And this was also taken in at Disappearing Island, as was this. And so if you take a look at the structure of these birds, the greater yellowlegs is bigger, more robust, and the bill is considerably longer and thicker than you have in the lesser yellowlegs. In fact, the lesser yellowlegs bill is not much more than the width of the head to the base of the bill, whereas the greater yellowlegs, you can see is this is considerably longer than the width of the head. So this is the greater yellowlegs, and here's the lesser yellowlegs. Look at this, is not much more than the width of the head. Another one that is similar is the Stilt Sandpiper. It has a longer bill, but notice that it's slightly down curved. It also has yellow legs, but they're not as yellow. It does, though, share with the yellowlegs a white rump. So both the greater yellowlegs, the lesser yellowlegs, and the Stilt Sandpiper all have this white rump, which can be confusing. One of the most confusing pairs are the Dowitchers. We have two different kinds of Dowitchers here, the short-billed Dowitcher and the long-billed Dowitcher. One of the things that's convenient is that during the winter, it's helpful that short-billed Dowitchers tend to stay on the coastline, and long-billed Dowitchers tend to spend their winters in the freshwaters areas. So in freshwater areas like the lower St. Johns River, Lake Apopka area, good place for long-billed Dowitcher, whereas the short-billed Dowitcher is more common in saltwater areas. Merritt Island National Wildlife Refuge is a place where, confusingly enough, you can find both of them. So, you know, how do you sort the two out? Short-billed Dowitchers have, in general, a shorter bill, but that can be confusing because females can have really quite a long bill. But the bill tends to have a kink in it right about here so that it goes out and then it kind of droops down a little bit. It's not obvious, but there is a little droop to the bill. And the bill attaches to the face in a way that kind of makes this area kind of arc, the white area, the superciliary stripe kind of arc up above the eye in a little more defined way than on a long-billed Dowitcher. But one of the best ways is really the structure. Short-billed Dowitchers tend to be flatter on the back and not as round on the underside. So here are, you can see that in the breeding plumage and non-breeding plumage, they look very different, but the structure is the same. Relatively flat back, these yellowish colored legs, the bill that's long but has a slight droop, bill that's long with a slight droop, and the way it attaches to the face is kind of low, and so you end up with kind of this arc. So flatter back, not very round. So, and then in both Dowitchers, when they fly away, they have a white wedge that goes up the center of the back. So let's take a look at a long-billed Dowitcher. Now take a look at this guy. Notice how the bill is long and longer than that short-billed Dowitcher, but there's no kink on the tip. This was taken in the Merritt, and I'm sorry, in the St. Johns River in below Route 46. If you folks are familiar with that, you probably are, down towards Puzzle Lake. Also notice that there's barring on the sides in winter plumage, and it has this arc over the back and an arc underneath. Here you can see we're in freshwater. You've got water lettuce growing here, sign of freshwater. Let's take a look at these guys. Look how round this one is. And they often use the phrase that looks like they swallowed a grapefruit. And I think that is a really apt description. If you see a Dowitcher, which they probe sewing machine fashion, often sticking the bill way in the water and probing really rapidly straight up and down. That's a classic way of feeding of Dowitchers. But look at this just round shape. Here's a whole group of long-billed Dowitchers. And here you can see how that bill attaches and that white mark is running almost in a straight line. Really rounded shape, rounded backs, rounded on the underneath, a barring on the sides. Classic long-billed Dowitchers. We have an interesting feature about our willets. Anytime you go to the beach, you're going to find a willet. What is peculiar is that we actually have two different kinds of willets. We have an eastern willet and a western willet, and they're both on our beaches, but it makes it so that we never have to worry about finding a willet on the beach. There will always be one. At some point, they may actually separate these two. They actually have a slightly different voice, and they do look different. The western willet, this is a western willet. They have, they're longer legged, they're grayer overall. The bill is longer and usually has a bluish base. And you compare that to this, of course, is in breeding plumage, but these are eastern willets, and these are a pair. They nest here, and in this case, this is at the Merritt Island National Wildlife Refuge. You have a courting pair, and they have this heavily barred plumage, but these bills are much shorter, and they tend to be a little bit flesh-colored at the base. So this is an eastern willet, and you see it's much browner, especially in the breeding season, and this kind of a fleshy colored base, shorter bill and shorter legged than the western willet. So just to give you a combo, I was lucky enough one day to get both. And here is an eastern willet on the left. This is a western willet on the right. A bigger western willet is bigger, longer legged, longer billed than the eastern willet. This is an eastern willet nest that I found one time. And you see they're very cryptically colored eggs, very difficult to find a willet nest. And again, you get another bird with this very striking display when they're in flight. Eastern willets are going to leave our area in early in the fall, and they strike out and they spend the winters along the northern coast of South America. And they tend to have an interesting route. They're going to leave and go out straight off the ocean and swing out and come down to South America. But they basically make a circuit, and these ones that have been radio tagged end up leaving that coastal area and then winding their way up through the islands and hit Florida and scoot up along the coastline to go back to their breeding colonies. Of course, we have ones here, and the ones that breed here do basically the same thing, coming down this way and then up along the coastline. So that's the eastern willet. The western willet is going to be breeding out in the western United States and then spends the winter months here. So we end up with eastern willets here during the late spring and spending the summer and then leaving. And but just as they are leaving, the western willets from the west are coming in and spending the fall and winter here and leave in the spring. So we always have willets. They're just not the same ones.
Michael, I heard that the willets have bluer legs.
The western willets do have bluer legs. Yes, that's another good feature. Here is the red knot, and the red knot is common in groups, sometimes fairly large groups, up to 70, 80 or more birds feeding along our beaches. And this is a young bird, but they tend to have these paler gray rumps. They're actually slightly marked, but it does make the rump pale when you see them. They have a rather short, kind of yellowy green legs, relatively short bills. They have tremendous migratory patterns. We have some that spend the winter here, but there are others that are going to spend the winters on the coast of southern South America. And they then make this leap all the way up to the Chesapeake Bay and the Delaware Bay, where they feed on the young of horseshoe crabs and fatten up to make the jump to the Arctic to breed way up in the Arctic. Oh, wrong way. We also have the spotted sandpiper, and unfortunately, the way we see them is like this. And so this is another one of these birds that is just like, who names these birds? So this is the spotted sandpiper the way that we normally see it. It's got kind of greenish legs. It bobs its tail, and it has a peculiar flight. The flight tends to hold its wings almost below the horizontal and have a very rapid burst of flight, real rapid flapping of its wings, and keeping the wings down low below the horizontal. But if you see them in the spring, we do get to see them. This was photographed here in Florida. It was, in full breeding plumage with all this beautiful spotting. It is similar to the solitary sandpiper. And the solitary sandpiper is a little different shape. It's slimmer and longer, and especially told by its longer wings, has a bit longer bill, and also kind of yellowy legs, but it has a very distinctive white eye ring and a mark here giving it kind of a set of spectacles. Here's another solitary sandpiper. That eye ring really stands out. The purple sandpiper is kind of an anomaly in Florida. We probably wouldn't even have them if it wasn't for the jetty systems that have developed around the various inlets in Florida. And because the jetties have been built, there are rocks, and it's going to be rocks that are the home for purple sandpipers. This is a bird of the North Atlantic, but they do filter down to our area. This is taken in Ponce Inlet, and they do, if you kind of squint your eye and think about it real hard, you can say, yeah, maybe that's purple, but you have to have a little imagination. They have rather short bills, very short legs, and you usually find them on the various jetties in the northern part of the state, only during the winter, and hanging out with the ruddy turnstones. The bill has a kind of a yellowish, orangey colored base and a darker tip. And sometimes they stay a little bit later, and this one was in full breeding plumage, and so it has more striping on it, and it's really a handsome little shorebird, very short legs. The pectoral sandpiper is kind of a medium-sized sandpiper, bigger than the smallest ones like least sandpiper, but much smaller than ones that we've looked at, like the godwits and those types, much smaller than that. And they have a very heavily spotted and streaked head and neck, but it ends in a very sharp demarcation on the chest. It makes them really very easy to recognize. They have yellowish colored legs and a two-tone bill that's kind of yellowy at the base with a darker tip. And here you can see that chest band. It's not really a band so much as all of the markings end really abruptly, so that it gives kind of this bib effect to it. And when they fly, that bib stands out. It's really easy to recognize. Notice that it doesn't have a white rump, and it doesn't have much of a wing stripe at all. It's actually very plain marked with this white belly and this demarcation from the markings on the chest. Give you a size comparison. Here is a pectoral sandpiper on the left. This is a stilt sandpiper in breeding plumage on the right. And see that slightly down curved bill of a stilt sandpiper. And during the breeding season, they get this rusty area around behind the eye, and a little bit of rusty on the top of the head too. Wilson snipe, if you go on a snipe hunt, there actually is a bird that you could try and capture on a snipe hunt. Although I don't think the Boy Scouts know that there's really a snipe. This is Wilson snipe. You find it in wet agricultural fields and the edges of marshes and such. Has a very long bill. It has these very distinct streakings on the back, rather short legs, really round, and it has longitudinal stripes going from the front to the back of the head. Very different from this guy, the American woodcock, which is superficially very similar, but the woodcock has stripes that run the opposite direction, run across the top of the head. Woodcock are secretive, and it's hard to find them. This one, though, I found in a neighbor's yard one night. I just saw it. I was actually walking the dog and saw this bird fly around in the dark because they are basically nocturnal, and found it flying around in the dark, went back, got a flashlight and a camera, and managed to get a photograph. The eyes are set way back on the head, so that this bird, while it's probing for especially earthworms, it likes worms, so as it's probing in these wetland areas, it's actually able to see behind it. So extraordinary adaptation, very cryptically colored. They often will spend the night, or really the day, in wetland areas. I've spooked them out of swamps before, where you're just walking through a swampy area, not obviously where there's standing water, but they just flush in front of you. They have really rounded wings. They do breed in the state, and there are a number of them that breed both in Volusia County and certainly around the Lake Wekiva area. So it is possible to hear their distinctive peent call and watch them in their courtship displays. One of the really interesting shorebirds that we have is the buff-breasted sandpiper. And this is a bird of not really of shoreline so much as of grasslands. And so this is a bird of open country, and sometimes you find them on agricultural areas or especially sod fields. And this one is actually displaying. There's also another grassland piper, and these kind of get the nickname of grass pipers, is the buff-breasted sandpiper. And they're often in open grassy areas. Another one that likes that same kind of habitat is the upland sandpiper. And it has a really relatively short bill, very long body. So it's a very different shape from many of our sandpipers. And then you get to some of the more difficult ones, these ones that are kind of collectively called the peeps. And here, just like we were talking about earlier, here there are 3 different species in this photograph. This is the Dunlin. These are western sandpipers, all in the foreground and in the background. And then standing here, the little bit paler one, that's a Sanderling. So let's start off with a Sanderling, because they're great birds. You know, this is the bird that when you go to the beach, it's like the little wind-up toy. You know, you crank the little key, and you know, and it scoots around. Well, the Sanderling is the one that is racing towards the retreating wave, and when the wave comes in, it turns around and scoots back. Look like they can't fly 10 feet. You know, you can walk right up to these birds. They're all over the beaches. And yet this bird doesn't nest in Florida. It's going to be going all the way to the shores of the Arctic Ocean. But before it does, it's going to change from this plumage, this kind of very pale white belly and pale gray on the back with the black blunt bill and black legs. It's going to change to this. And this is the really attractive breeding plumage that you don't often get to see, because it's only going to be wearing this just before they leave. So in late spring, they begin to change, and this one was flushed into full breeding plumage in late May, just before it left. This is a young one, so that in August, when they come back, this is the way the youngest ones look. This is Dunlin. Dunlin have kind of this really kind of odd, really long bill for its size, it seems like, with a down curve to it. Black legs, black bill. So that when we're looking at these various peeps, it's important to take a look at a couple things. What stands out? What is the leg color? What is the bill length and color and shape? Oh, wrong way. So here's a Dunlin in the background and what looks identical practically, but a Western Sandpiper in the foreground. So the Dunlin is larger, the bill is much longer, but it's similar. It's long and drooping. Here is a Western Sandpiper, long, but not as drooping and not as long. So Western Sandpiper, the little guy here, and the Dunlin. But Dunlin have a surprise in the spring. This is this same bird. This bird is going to turn to this in the springtime. And you can see this in May, especially late May. If you go to the right places like Disappearing Island in Volusia County, or a lot of our areas, Merritt Island National Wildlife Refuge, where you might find a good selection of sandpipers, you can find the really strikingly beautiful Dunlin. And here's the Western Sandpiper. Again, black legs, black bill with a slight droop. And compare that to the Sanderling. So Sanderling's a bit bigger, both black legs, both black bills, but look how the more even pale color of a Sanderling, the thicker black bill, and considerably larger. And you tend to find the Western Sandpiper on kind of mudflat areas and Sanderlings more on the beaches. And compare this guy to a Semipalmated Sandpiper. Here's a Semipalmated Sandpiper as opposed to the Semipalmated Plover. Again, a black blunt-tipped bill. This is Semipalmated Sandpiper, black legs, black bill, but very blunt. Give you a size comparison. Here's a Semipalmated Sandpiper, black legs, black blunt bill. Here's a least Sandpiper, even a little bit smaller, black bill, but with a slight curve to it and pointed, and yellow legs. So these kind of straw colored, maybe slightly greenish colored legs, but pale compared to the black legs of a Semipalmated and Western Sandpipers. So the least Sandpiper is our smallest Sandpiper. It's brownish overall. It has this little short bill. It's rather sharply pointed, and it has a slight droop to it. And notice these yellowish colored legs. They can also sometimes appear quite gray. So they're not always super brown, but they tend to be darker than those other Sandpipers. But again, this bill that has this slight curve to it and straw colored legs. The youngsters can be really beautiful in the springtime, or rather in the fall. And this is a juvenile least Sandpiper in the fall. This is in September. And they have really beautiful rusty plumage. But again, that same characteristic, the pointed bill, slight droop to it, and these yellowy or greenish tinged legs. Sometimes we get some really rare ones, and we don't have enough time to talk about all of the really rare Sandpipers and such that have shown up in the state. We've had quite a few, but one of the most interesting was this Asian visitor, the red-necked stint. We occasionally get some real rarities in here. Another one that's not as rare, but is the ruff. And the ruff has straw-colored legs, yellowy colored legs, slightly down-curved bill, tends to have this spotting. But one of the ways to really tell them is a ruff has this very unique U-shaped patch on the rump, so that the white extends down the sides, across, and back up again. And that is diagnostic of a ruff. We also have two slightly bigger peeps, a little bit bigger than the western and semi-palmated and least sandpipers, is the white-rumped sandpiper. And notice how differently it's shaped. That's because its wings are so long, they extend. These are the tips of the wings here. This is the tip of the tail. So the wingtips extend beyond the tip of the tail, which gives it a very long, attenuated look. And it has rather longish black legs. And then the bill is dark, a slight droop to it, but it tends to have some yellowish or sometimes even a reddish tinge to the base of the bill. Here's another white-rumped sandpiper. This one does not show the red at the base, but this is also a white rump. Look how long these wings are. This is the tail tip here. These are the wings extending beyond the tips of the tail. But when they fly, it's hard to beat. The conclusive field mark for one of these little sandpipers is this white rump, definitely a white-rumped sandpiper. Can compare that to the other one with really long wings, is the Baird's sandpiper. Baird's sandpiper is a little different color. The bill is usually quite straight, and it can be a gray to a brownish plumage. It has more streaking on the chest, and the streaking doesn't extend onto the sides at all. But it has very long wings. Here are the wing tips. Here's the tail tip. So again, it has that long body shape that comes from such long wings. So that's Baird's sandpiper. There's another view of a different Baird's sandpiper. They often have some little black flecking in it, but again, these long wings and this fairly sharply pointed bill, black legs. And here's another one. This one had a little browner tinge to it, very sharply pointed straight bill, long, long wings. But when they fly, no white rump. Another one that we have that is, I think, quite distinctive is the Wilson's Phalarope. And phalaropes are really fascinating creatures. The Wilson's Phalarope is found out in the western U.S., and we get a few of them that make their way to our coastline. They have an extremely fine bill. And so they pick small organisms out of the water. They often spin in the water. They'll paddle around in the water and spin around and get small organisms off of virtually the surface of the water. When they fly, Wilson's Phalarope shows a distinct white rump. And you can see this very long, super straight bill, very thin. When you see this bird, it tends to be very white on the underside. It's really quite distinct. A lot of white on the face and this long, very straight, slim bill. Wilson's Phalarope. Compare that to the other two phalaropes that we have, both the red-necked and the red phalarope. And what a different lifestyle. I mean, these are three different kinds of phalaropes, but the Wilson's Phalarope you're going to find in wetland habitats. But both the red-necked and the red phalaropes have a very different lifestyle. Instead of breeding out west in some of those alkaline lakes and such, the red-necked phalarope and the red phalarope are breeding on the Arctic tundra, and they are then leaving that area, and they're going, of all places, out to the open ocean. And so the two other phalaropes, red-necked and red, are going to be found offshore. And so when I take pelagic trips out offshore, we'll find, for example, this red-necked phalarope. They're browner. They have a very distinctive mark behind the eye, very sharply pointed bill like that Wilson's phalarope, but with this pattern of stripes on the back. When we find them, often they're in small groups, sometimes fairly good sized groups, and they're floating on the open ocean. This is out in the Gulf Stream, this photo. One of the things you don't get to see very often are the feet of phalaropes, which are quite unusual. And here you can see, this is an individual that came into our bird hospital at the Marine Science Center. And here you can see that the toes of a red-necked phalarope and red phalarope have these lobes on them. And how helpful that is for an animal that likes to paddle around. So yet it also needs to spend time on like the tundra, where having a webbed foot is not the best. So they have this adaptation of having these flanges on the toes that when they pull their foot forward, those flanges fold back and don't provide a lot of resistance. But as they're paddling around offshore, they open up and help them to be able to paddle in a marine environment. So there you have the toes, lobed toes of a red-necked phalarope. Here's that really distinct mark around the eye and behind the eye, and this really narrow bill. This is the red phalarope. Similar, a mark behind the eye, but look at this short bill, and it's blunt-tipped and a grayish back. And so the gray back is virtually unmarked. So that when they fly, they actually look kind of like a Sanderling. They have a really bold white wing stripe, but an even gray back. This is with a blunt tip, eye mark, and well offshore. This one taken in the middle of the Gulf Stream is the red phalarope. So, you know, we have such a diversity of shorebirds, you know, from the great huge ones, the multi-faceted ones, like the black-necked stilts, and the incredibly well-marked things like an oystercatcher, to the peeps that are small and kind of difficult, to even sandpipers that live on the open ocean like our phalaropes. So it's a terrifically interesting group of birds. Over 50 species that have been found just here in Florida. And if you go to other parts of the world, there are even more kinds of shorebirds to be able to enjoy. So I hope you've had a chance to learn a little bit about identifying some of the shorebirds that we've got in our area. And I'm going to leave you with a red phalarope about to land on the water. So you can, it is one of the few times when you've got, this is out on the Gulf Stream. It's practically completely calm, a wonderful time to see one of our great shorebirds, the red phalarope. So I'm going to turn this off. You are very welcome. Let me get out of this, and I'll see if anybody has any questions. Let me see if I can figure out how to stop share screen. Should be stop the screen. There we go.
Steve Metabobra, where are you from? Well, you can't talk. You can chat.
Yeah, I can read it. Okay. Well, I think there's no doubt we're going to see a lot of changes to the shorebird. Unfortunately, you know, so many of our shorebirds are breeding on the Arctic tundra, and we're already seeing changes to the tundra itself. There are changes to the permafrost. The permafrost is the the layer just underneath the surface that stays frozen all year. And now there are some areas where that permafrost is melting. That's going to cause floristic changes. There's already some movement of the Arctic vegetation is getting pushed up because you have that northern boreal forest that stretches all across northern Canada, Alaska, and all the way across Russia. You know, it's this huge forest. It's going to be able to survive farther north. And so there's going to be some adjustments to, you know, what is now open tundra is probably going to be taken over by different kinds of vegetation. So, you know, one of the climate change issues is it is going to change vegetation patterns. And when vegetation patterns change, that has a cascading effect to other kinds of organisms. So I'm sure there will be winners and losers in that exchange. And unfortunately, we'll see what happens with the shorebirds. But yeah, that's a great point that climate change is going to be an important factor in the livelihood of shorebirds, who are so dependent, or at least many species are so dependent on the Arctic tundra.
And they're eating the mosquito larvae as the frost thaws?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, not just mosquito larvae, but yes, there's this bloom of insects that takes place in that thawing period in the Arctic, and it is, you know, in some sense, a terrible place to be if you're a human, because the number of mosquitoes is intense.
Anyone else? Put it in the chat. We'll take more minutes. Do the sandpipers have white edges to their feathers or something? Remember that?
So, I mean, some do. Yes. I mean, not all. I mean, you have a lot of different kinds of sandpipers. Some of them have white edging. I'm not sure exactly which ones you're talking about, but I mean, there are also different changes in juveniles to adults. Also have you know, some changes in the plumage there too.
All right. Well, we're not getting any questions. We're just getting a lot of nice kudos. You can't see them, but awesome presentation, et cetera, et cetera. And we a lot of the people from out of town, even out west. It's very cool. So anybody else? Last question. Okay, one more. As a birder, is there a good shorebird field guide that you would recommend?
Oh, great question. And the answer is yes. So let me plug a few of the books. I actually brought some of them with me, so I think they'll be able to see me. This is my favorite one. Let me see if I can do this right. This is a I'll plug this for Kevin Carlson and Richard Crosley and Michael O'Brien. If you don't know those folks, they are some of the best shorebird experts in the world. And it's called the Shorebird Guide. I'm trying to, there we go.
Yeah, we see it.
There you can see it. The Shorebird Guide. One of the great things about this one is that it is photographs. And there are extensive sets of information on how to identify various shorebirds, even rare ones. This is the green sandpiper from Europe. Here's for those folks out west. Whoa, there we go. Sorry, I'm terrible at this. Here's the rock sandpiper. So there's many different plumages that are shown, adults and juveniles. Here's some very similar to one of the ones I just showed you from here. This is their book. There's a Semipalmated Sandpiper. So this is a great one, the Shorebird Guide by Michael O'Brien and Richard Crosley and Kevin Carlson. There are others. This is another one that I like. This is also a photographic guide. This one's by Richard Chandler, The Shorebirds of North America, Europe, and Asia.
Uh-huh.
And it also has photographs, but because this one covers a greater geographic area, it's kind of interesting because it has certain species that we wouldn't have. Latham's snipe. So it includes all of Europe and Asia, which is really helpful if you are interested in like rarities that might show up, or if you're going to travel. So this is Shorebirds of North America, Europe, and Asia. This is an older book, but I've actually always liked this book. It's Shorebirds, an Identification Guide. It's kind of more like the older types with excellent plates. But again, this is drawings, not photographs, but lots of good text with this.
And that's for Europe as well?
And maps. I'm sorry?
That's for Europe as well as North America?
This is the whole world.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a neat one. In fact, you can see you can see that it has world maps. I don't know, maybe you can't see it. I can't tell if I'm.
Yeah, we can see that. Uh-huh.
See that? Yeah, so it has a map of like Europe and Asia. This is South American snipes. So the snipes of South America. So a really comprehensive book, which is great. And then there's another one, Shorebirds of North America, Europe, and Asia, with nice paintings in it. So there are lots of great books. Those are my favorite. If I would say for us, if you're going to buy one, get the Shorebird Guide. So it's a great one.
Okay, someone asked about Disappearing Island. This is New Smyrna, or something specific?
Yes, it is in New Smyrna, or it's actually not in New Smyrna itself. It's in Ponce de Leon Inlet. The name of that inlet that most people call Ponce Inlet is actually Ponce de Leon Inlet. And there is a very large sandbar inside the inlet. You cannot reach it from land, and that's Disappearing Island. It used to be that it disappeared at high tide and was uncovered at lower tides. Now it's actually built up and built up. It's now like half a mile long and a good quarter of a mile wide. It has dunes on it now, and it has a mangrove forest and a little bit of Spartina marsh in it. Fascinating place, and it is terrific shorebird habitat. And so you have to get there by boat, but you can kayak there. So it's a great place to visit. Do not, if you can help it, go on the weekend, especially during the warmer months. It is a favored hangout. There can be 200 boats around the island, and that's really unfortunate. But if you can get there early in the morning or in an off season, you can have this, this beautiful habitat to yourself. I shouldn't tell anybody this.
And other places in Florida that you find particularly good?
Oh yeah, there are great places all along the Gulf Coast. A lot of different kinds of places along the Gulf Coast, and it would not be very far for you folks to. Oh man,
Fort DeSoto?
Well, yeah, Fort DeSoto. It'd be great, but there are also some really good ones just north of there. In Honeymoon Island is a great place. There's some good places down towards Lee County and, farther south. There's all kinds of places in the state that are good. There's some great places in Northeast Florida, up in the Huguenot area and Little Talbot Island, Big Talbot Island. Those are all good shorebird habitats also. It's hard to beat Merritt Island National Wildlife Refuge. It is really good. Pump House Road and East Gator Creek can be excellent shorebirding places, as can even Black Point can be good too. Lots of good diversity.
Okay. Well, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much. Thanks,
It was
everybody.
a pleasure. It was my pleasure. Take care.
Okay. Good night, everybody.
Good night.